Hello and good day to everyone, especially to you, sir. We are going to present our topic or discuss our topic entitled Private versus Digital Public Digital Self. My name is Francis Gabriel Salera, and in order for us to gain a thorough understanding of this topic, we must first establish these objectives in our mind. At the conclusion of this lesson, you'll be able to comprehend and learn about digital self as well as distinguish between private and public digital selves.
So, hello everyone, and for today, I will be talking about the private self. So, the private self consciousness is associated with better access to self knowledge and a greater interest in new self knowledge, regardless of whether the knowledge is positive. As a result, the self knowledge of people high in private self consciousness plays a more prominent role in their behavior. Now, it is a part of a person's awareness known only to themselves. The private self is the only one aware of true feelings and self worth, as opposed to the outside physical and more noticeable person the public sees. Many organisms exhibit at least a rudimentary form of self awareness, by which they experience themselves as distinct from their environment. However, humans are capable of more profound and consequential forms of self awareness that make possible uniquely human capacities such as introspection and self reflection. Although all normal functioning people are sometimes self aware, some people are consistently aware of themselves. The tendency to consistently direct attention toward the self is referred to as self consciousness. According to Arnold Boss, to whom the seminal research on self consciousness is attributed, the tendency to consistently direct attention toward the self is evidenced in the highly self conscious person in the following ways. The first is an intense focus on behavior, past, present, and future. Second is a heightened sensitivity to privately experienced feelings, recognition of positive and negative characteristics in oneself. That's the third. A tendency to introspect, imagining oneself. Fourth. Fifth, an awareness of how one appears to the others, and we have concerns about others' appraisal. A distinction typically is drawn between forms of self consciousness, corresponding to the two distinct vantage points from which people can direct attention toward themselves, and the different aspects of the self experience from those vantage points. Now, private self consciousness is the tendency to focus on oneself from a personal vantage point and attend to aspects of the self that are not readily apparent to others, such as one's thoughts and feelings. Public self consciousness is the tendency to focus on oneself from the perceived vantage point of real or imagined others and to attend to aspects of the self that are observable by others, such as facets of one's appearances and behaviors. Now, a person's private self, in definition, is its only one aware of true feelings. We can also refer private self as true self. Many people like to think they have an inner, private, or true self, but most social scientists are skeptical of such notions. If the inner self is different from the way the person acts at all the time, why is the inner one true self This is how the notion of a private self is introduced in a recent textbook on social science. It is suggested that there is a conflict between folk psychology and science, where the true self is a notion that does not hold up to closer scrutiny. This view recently been reinforced by a number of studies showing that belief in a true self and private self is indeed common while questioning its actual existence. Is the view we have of our private self merely a reflection of the sociocultural environment in which we exist? And can someone have a private self or true self that is good even if they continually act in ways that are harmful? Findings from research using the self-consciousness scale and laboratory experiments in which self-consciousness is manipulated indicate that self-consciousness is implicated in a host of social attitudes, emotions, and behaviors. Private self-consciousness is associated with better access to self-knowledge and a greater interest in new self. Knowledge, regardless of whether the knowledge is positive, as a result of the self-knowledge of people high in private self-consciousness, plays a more prominent role in their behavior. For instance, compared to people low in private self-consciousness, their attitudes are more predictive of their behavior. They are less likely to conform when their opinions are challenged, and they are more resistant to inaccurate suggestions about their own sensations. Private self-consciousness also is associated with emotional experience because introspection often leads to self-criticism. Private self-consciousness can give rise to negative emotion. In addition, attention directed towards private self aspects appears to intensify current emotional experience, may it be positive or negative. The self, one of the most central as well critically discussed concepts in philosophy and psychology, has a long history. The idea that one has an underlying self in addition to a surface personality can be traced back to the notion that one has a soul that is potentially immortal. In the Egyptian culture, only the pharaoh possessed an immortal, divine soul while alive. Only at the moment of death could other Egyptians gain such a soul. In ancient Greek culture, Socrates was known for having heard an inner voice that indicated to him what he should and should not do. This was part of what led to his demise, as he was accused of following other gods. The inner voice was daimonion, a divine being to Socrates and not one of the gods condoned by the Athenian city-state. Such a private divine being is now commonly understood to refer to conscience in the Christian tradition, which is connected to the moral essence, the true self or the private self of an individual. The idea of person's moral essence was developed further in Greek thought. For example, it was connected to the performance of specific virtues by Aristotle. Aristotle also suggested that the true self of each is the divine intellectual or nous. However, when answering the question, "Who are you?" it was for a long time customary to name one's ancestor. In ancient Rome, the firstborn son was the property of the paterfamilias until the death of the father. During the funeral procession, the son wore the father's death mask. It may be noted that the word mask is associated to the word person, suggesting that we can take on different identities but also that there is an underlying essence. Augustus is known for writing the first autobiography, inaugurating a genre defined by the idea that certain events and thoughts are more important than others when seeking to understand who someone is. Arguably, the Judeo-Christian religions understand that also contributed to the view that all human beings have a divine core, regardless of the background. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There are neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus. In the Renaissance, Pico della Mirandola emphasized that the notion of agency in his oration on human dignity, making God exclaim that it is a matter of will whether the human being shall become animal or divine, mortal or immortal. He quoted, I have placed you at the very center of the world, so that from that vantage point you may with greater ease glance round but you on all that the world contains. We have made you a creature neither of heaven nor of earth, neither mortal nor immortal, in order that you may, as the free and proud shaper of your own being, fashion yourself in the form you may prefer. It will be in your power to descend to the lower, British forms of life. You will be able, through your own decision, to rise again to the superior orders whose life is divine.
Hi, I am Cadet Rodanes. I'm one of the presenters for Public Self versus Private Self. I'm going to be focusing more on Public Self. What is Public Self? Public self information about the self, or integrated view of the self that is conveyed to the others in actions, self descriptions, appearance, and social interactions. The public self of an individual can change depending on what is receiving the impressions and how they are presented. What is public self in a simpler way? Public self can be associated to someone who's an extrovert. What is an extrovert? Someone who is easily able to communicate with someone publicly, someone who's not afraid to talk to people. So the introvert is the opposite of it.
However, before we proceed, do you know what is digital self? So as a result, digital self is when you are on internet. Your digital self is the persona that you present to the rest of the world. A person's online identities can be distinct from their real world selves, while others can have a single online identity that is more or less identical to the one they inhabit in the real world. So, what are the differences between digital and real self? So, the characteristics you present online differ from the characteristics you present in the physical world. Your online identity is not the same as your real world identity. We will proceed to the private self now. So, what is private self? As private self is self-knowledge is a part of one's identity that is only known to the individual who possesses it, such as one's inner feeling or one's own self-concept. Depending on the situation, it may be similar or dissimilar to the public self that once revealed to others in a given situation. Consider the concept of social identity as well. So the information about the person that he or she is unwilling to share with others is referred to as a private self information. So one example of my private self is that I am very shy and conservative person, and although I may appear to be a strict individual, when you meet me, or when you met my truly true self, or when you truly know me, I am a joyful and nice individual. I am very childish person who enjoys spending time playing video games such as Valorant, Dota, and so on. So that was an example of one's own private self. So what is the significant or the importance of private self? So better access to one's own knowledge as well as a greater interest in self-knowledge regardless of whether that knowledge is positive or all associated with private self-consciousness. As well as a result, people who have a higher level of private self-consciousness have a greater self-awareness, which influence their behavior more significantly. So that's for all about private self.
Hello guys, my name is Ian Joel Birin. This is the continuation of Gabriel Serra report about private self. So in these slides, tells my private self opens up and shows my fan side. I am a person who expresses my feelings honestly and is concerned about how individuals around me feel. I am naturally generous and put the other people's happiness ahead of my own. I like relaxing and playing games because they enable me to reconnect with the childhood inside. My family views me as a superhero due to the ordeals I've through, but I continue to try to be a nice person. I am really conscious about keeping the home tidy and controlling my spendings. The others, I speak in very casual, personable tone. So we have reviewed that research supporting the existence of need for private self and have attempted to account of these findings with a theory that explains private self is why we need it and how the need for private self affect behavior. Briefly, we propose that a culture reduces the terror engineered by necessities of our vulnerability and mortality by providing and shared symbolic of reality that imputes order, predictability, significance, and permanence to lives. This cultural drama provides the possibility of leading a meaningful, enduring existence. Equality is attained only when a person believes that he is a valued participant in such a cultural drama. This attitude, which is to us private self, serves as essential defense anxiety buffering fact, embedding the individual within the transcendent cultural drama. Stated simply, esteem gives people basically a sense of security that is needed very badly. The resolution in favor of a motivational explanation for this self-serving bias is quite similar to the resolution of earlier dissonance versus self-perception controversy. A number of studies have clearly shown that negative effect does play a role in a attitude change after individual feels responsible for engaging in a behavior that is foreseeable. Negative consequence, interestingly, the findings of attitude change that have been attributed to a dissonance reduction process can be interpreted as resulting from a needed defend self-esteem. In virtual of these studies, the attitude change can be viewed as a way for individual to deny that he or she has done something that is either immoral or stupid. In recent years, a substantial number of the other studies have also yielded findings supportive of the existence of a need for self-esteem. Reason that of if individuals try to protect self-esteem by attributing failures to external factors, when failures are anticipated, they may set up plausible external attributions by engaging in performance inhibiting behavior prior to during performance. Evidence for the use of this strategy, which Berglas and Jones in 1878 have applied labeled self-handicapping, has been obtained in number of such findings tests to strength of self-esteem. Clearly, support of this existence of self-esteem need has been found in experimental research, beginning with studies demonstrating a self-serving bias in individuals' casual attribution of their own success and failures. These studies typically entail randomly assigned subjects to experience either the favorable or unfavorable outcomes on a test, then obtaining their estimates of the extent to which potential casual factors such as ability, effort, luck, and thus difficulty were responsible of their particular outcomes. The one highly consistent finding has been that individuals who experience success assign greater responsibility to factors within themselves and less responsibility to factors outside themselves than do individuals who experience failures. Thus, as we could expect it, if people do indeed have a need for self-esteem, individual seems to take credit for success but deny responsibility for failure. Eliminating cognitive explanations in the last 10 years, however, a set of alternative explanations of this self-serving attributional bias in the absence of self-esteem, despite the factor that the notion of a need for self-esteem has the basis for all the research on self-serving bias up to the point in time. It was argued that such native explanations are preferable because they're really only on the widely information processing framework for understanding human behavior. So the most compelling of this cognitive explanation is if individuals believe that they are generally competent, they are likely to infer that they perform competently it is because of their abilities, and when they poorly it because external factors.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christian B. Castigliote, and I'm talking about the public self. What is the public self? The public self is one's view of oneself by others as conveyed through public information, public action, and interaction with others. The public self generally depends on the public for definition, but it is also an individual's view of how he or she fits in the actions taken while in the public. Public self is an information about self or an integrated view of the self that is conveyed to others in actions, self descriptions, and appearance in social interactions. An individual's public self may vary depending on the target or audience of such impression. The public self is often contrasted with the private self, which may be similar to or different from the other self once revealed to others. There are different kinds of examples on public self, just like, for example, is overt behavior. Overt behavior refers to an behavior or actions that are easily and directly observable. The example of overt behavior is running, smiling, dancing, arguing, frowning, or etc. The word overt can be defined as something that is plainly apparent and openly displayed. Covert behavior, which means secret or hidden. Covert is the opposite of overt, which means obvious or full view. Covert things are hidden private or stealthily. One of the examples is the mannerism. Mannerism is a habitual gesture or way of speaking or behaving or the other speech. These characteristics that someone does often. The way you talk and gesture are examples of mannerism. When you constantly twirling your hair to an extreme extent, tilting head in thought, hair tossing, grinding teeth, rubbing the neck when embarrassed, like to wink, always breaking eye contact, and etc. These are examples of mannerisms. How to stop bad mannerisms? But first, what is bad mannerism? Mannerism from the root word manner are form of behavior we act the most of the time that makes us being who we are, or shall we say that makes us different to the others people. They are the behavioral pattern that set us apart from each other. We are being recognized by the people as having own identities, different from others. However, these behavioral patterns can become disorder which will surely become a burden to us. This mannerisms is called bad mannerism. They are being planted in our subconsciousness, and we can hardly notice them being done by ourselves. We always do this abnormal behavior from time to time, even though we do not intend to do them. These are the bad mannerisms.
I am Clarence Alzarzola. So now I will continue the said topic, the public self. So the next example of public self is the stylistic quirks. Stylistic quirks is an odd or unusual characteristics or habit. The examples are first, winks at particular characters, Second is high pitched voice. And third is constantly rubs hands. Next is the expressive qualities. Expressive qualities is an action or interaction, consciously or unconsciously communicating emotions, desires, intents, and or personality. We can also see the effective communication, expressive communication, in facial expression, nonverbal communication, and self-touch. Expressive qualities have two defining characteristics in Gestalt theory. Generally, emotional or dynamic terms indicate expressive qualities when they are used to depict perception. Emotional expressiveness can be defined as individual ability to communicate emotional states through nonverbal movements, including through the face. Expressing emotions through facial and body movements is an evolved adaptation. Expressive qualities refers to the feelings, moods, and ideas that are disseminated to the viewers by an artist through art of work. This aesthetic quality was deeply favored by emotionalism. Next is how do you describe your public self? So, the public self is the view of oneself by others as conveyed through public information, public action, and interaction with others. The public self generally depends on the public for definition, but is also an individual's view of how he or she fits in an actions taken while in public. So, it is really obvious that in order for us to describe our public self, it is when are in public places, right? And doing anything like interacting to others, making scenarios in public places, and other stuffs that we do in public. We can easily describe that we are showing our public self because of our actions in the outside world. Public self is an information about the self or an integrated view of the self that is conveyed to others in actions, self descriptions, appearance, and social interactions. An individual's public self may vary depending on the target or audience of such impressions. Next is the what is public self awareness. Public self awareness is the ability to understand how others perceive you and usually follow social norms. Ensuring you practice your valedictorian speech so you don't make a mistake is a form of public self awareness. Public self awareness is when people are aware of how others see them. Self awareness is the ability to recognize and understand oneself. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand one's own feelings, as well as how those feelings influence one's actions and decisions. When it comes to managing one's activities and planning for the future, self awareness is essential. This skill will help your team succeed while someone's in the spotlight, such as when giving a presentation or speaking in front of a group of friends. They are more likely to become conscious of their own public personas. It is common for people to follow social norms because of this form of self awareness. What it means to be aware of yourself and how your behaviors, thoughts, and feelings connect with your internal standards is called self awareness. Lastly, meaning of public self. Information about the self or an integrated view of the self that is conveyed to others in actions, self descriptions, appearance, and social interactions. An individual's public self may vary depending on the target or audience of such impressions. Public self is where you expresses all the things you did in a public way. A person's public self is how they are seen by others and when they are in the media, interacting with others, or taking part in public activities.
Good day, sir, and to classmates. I am John Magnevi Soland. and I will be tackling about the examples of private and public self. Now, there are lots of examples of public and private self, but today I will just show you some of it. But before I will tackle about the examples of public and private self, let me recap what is public and private self. Private self is the part of the self that is known mainly to oneself, such as one's inner feeling and self concept, while on public self, on the other hand, is the view of oneself by others as conveyed through public information, public action, and interaction with others. Okay, so what are the examples of private self? An example of public self is that a person or individual prefers or are comfortable expressing him or herself in public. Another example of public self is that a person is basically an extrovert wherein they like to go out instead of staying at home playing games. The last example that I will be giving in public self is that you want people to view your public figure like your physical attributes, like your facial profile, and stuff like that. Now, moving on to what are the examples of a private self. Private self, on the other hand, is basically the opposite of public self, wherein they are more comfortable or they prefer keeping their emotion to her or himself. Another example is that a person or an individual prefers staying home, playing games, and does not want to go out to party. The last example of private self is that you become aware of some aspects of yourself, but only in a private way. Personally, I am an ambivert, which is both extrovert and introvert in the same time. And that means that sometimes I want to go out with my friends, or sometimes I just wanted to stay at home playing games. That is why I also know why I also know why certain characteristics of an extrovert and an introvert because I am both of them. I also have an experience of both since I am an ambivert and therefore I can relate to both of them, whether going out in a club or playing games at home.
Hello everyone, especially to user. I am Jan Valda of Aibas Asa. Today I am going to discuss about the differences between the human personalities in private self and public self. So different personalities and behaviors are displayed by people based on their relationship with others. For example, they have a private self for those closest to them and a public self for those who are less close to them. It is so common in human nature to have two distinct personalities because most people do not want others to know how they are when they are alone. People tend to keep their private selves hidden and reveal their public selves to others, which can be the polar opposite of the former. Essentially, an individual can only reveal their original self, which is also known as their private self, to those in whom they have faith, not everyone of course. So psychology behind its personality. According to Nigel Nicholson in his article in which he discusses the behavior of people in various situations is particularly noteworthy. When he examines human behavior from a psychological perspective, we can see that the endocrine system and nervous system are thought to have an impact on how humans interact with their personalities. An average complex nervous system has a greater capacity for learning new responses than an average normal nervous system. In his quote, psychology is useful to manage because it provides a new and proactive way to think about human nature. It also offers a framework for understanding why people tend to act as they do in an organizational settings. The quote is essentially stating that public self is a framework of human nature that allows people to conceal their true selves from the other people. In this case, it demonstrates that human personalities vary depending on the situation, which can result in a wide range of behavior. According to Nicholson, the fact that human behavior changes in different situations is a normal part of the human condition. To put in another way, the environment in which can individual lives influences to pretend to be someone they are not rather than someone they are. This is why people keep their private selves hidden and only show their public selves to others, which can be quite different from the first. For example, the phrase, "we can be whoever we want behind the closed doors of our homes," is frequently heard. The home represents a safe and comfortable environment in which an individual can be alone with their thoughts and feelings. However, it can be anywhere as long as the individual is comfortable with the surroundings. A novel called The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson is about the good and evil personalities in an individual. It is an example of different personality of human behavior. In this novel, Dr. Jekyll develops a formula which separates the two personalities, the good and evil forces. The experiment went wrong, which leaves him with two different personalities. One is Dr. Jekyll and the second one is Mr. Hyde, who went to the dark side. It was on the moral side and in my own person that I learned to recognize the true and the primitive duality of man. I saw that of the two natures that contended in the field of my consciousness. So in this quote, it demonstrates that humans have two different distinct personalities that can be diametrically opposed to one another in their behavior. However, Dr. Jekyll's good and evil personality are depicted in the novel. But it is not limited to that alone. A person's personality is made up of a plethora of different variations that vary depending on the individual adaptations. People, in my opinion, have different personalities and they express their original selves to those with whom they are comfortable, while displaying their other personalities to those with whom they are less comfortable. As a result, the personalities are divided into two groups, the private self and the public self. Living with multiple personalities is common in human nature, and people prefer to keep their private selves hidden from those with whom they are uncomfortable, revealing their true selves. In other words, if a person is not comfortable with someone or a place, his or her true personalities will be hidden and a different personality will be revealed, which can have an impact on their behavior. The personality we choose to live with and the way we interact with others are irrelevant as long as no one is harmed by our actions or inactions. Every story has two sides, and the same is true personalities, because people typically behave in different ways depending on their environment. The environment plays a significant role in the development of a person's personality most of the time. People prefer to be open about themselves when they are alone, rather than when they are around with strangers. For lack of a better phrase, people have different personalities and they show their original selves to those with whom they are comfortable, while showing their other personas to those with whom they are less comfortable. This demonstrates that people enjoy concealing aspects of themselves that they don't want others to know about. And they also don't want others to pass judgment on them as a result. Many people do not like it when others judge them on the appearance of their behavior, which leads them to present themselves in ways that people find acceptable and desirable. It is possible for people to be double-faced and to have two distinct personalities, one for the general public and another for close friends and private time, while still being able to function and survive. These pairs of faces are normally diametrically opposed to one another, if not completely diametrically opposed to one another. having a double life is not only inconvenient for those around you, but it also difficult for the person who is leading a double life. We spend far too much energy maintaining two distinct images, and if there becomes known to the other group, the reputations will be severely harmed, and it will be extremely difficult to repair or even restore the situation. For my part, I am firmly of the opinion that a person does not require the effort to be someone else, because doing so well only make him miserable and cause significant disruption in his life. Following this theory, in order to become more like someone else, you must first change our own appearance and personality before you can alter your physical appearance or personality. Even though it is more difficult, the effort will be well worth it, and the results will be visible in a relatively short period of time. To achieve success in life, it is a good strategy to begin with a list of your character traits and then subdivide them into those that you are proud of and those that you want to be eliminated from your life. Following with this exercise, you should consider how you can eliminate your negative characteristics and develop a self-improvement strategy to help you achieve your goals. In order to ensure that work is successfully completed, you should summarize the work completed each month and revise the list to reflect any changes in circumstances that have occurred during the month. However, while the process is time-consuming and complicated, the end result is extremely rewarding, and it is something that you must go through if you want to achieve a long-term success in your company. In the short term, attempting to change your public image solely on a cosmetic level will yield only temporary and flimsy results. Because I am constantly working on my personality and I'm very proud of it, of who I am, I have no reason to believe that I will ever lead to two lives at the same time. And as for my immediate surroundings, I try to avoid people who are deceptive, because it is difficult to figure out what they're thinking when they're acting deceptively.
To my classmates and especially to you, sir, sadly, we have reached the end of this topic. Thank you all for listening and may you have good day. God bless you, everyone.